channel. So I have a lot of free content on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
So I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner with over 20 years of clinical experience. But really, in raising mentally strong kids, my experience comes from raising 7 kids. I adopted 5 from the foster care system. So they had reactive attachment disorder, post-traumatic stress. 2 of them had pretty significant physical and sexual abuse. And 1 was born addicted to substances. And so, I have 5 kids from that system and then 2 biological children.
Okay.
So even though I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, when you have to actually live it and raise kids, it's a completely different experience. And as I was adopting those children, I thought, oh, I'm a psych nurse practitioner. I got this. I know how to deal with trauma. I know how to deal with these things. And so I did. I went in with some ignorance and thankfully, because I don't know that I would have adopted 5 if I, realized how difficult it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through that. Shortly after that, I have 2 biological children who are younger than my adopted children. And we had a pretty catastrophic accident in 2005, where one of my adopted boys died in a drowning accident. And so it completely, upheavaled my hope and my, enthusiasm and, like I can do this. And I believe in God and I have a relationship with God. And it, really put like this, I'm doing this thinking I'm helping people. And now I have this tragedy. And he was the biological sister of the 2 girls with the pretty significant physical and sexual abuse. So now they have additional trauma after I told them that they were now safe, right? So, as a mother, I'm struggling through all of this. And shortly after Johnny's death, my biological son, Reggie, began having seizures and was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And we now know that those were inaccurate diagnoses. They were just kind of trying to figure it out. Like he had developmental delays. He literally could not sit still. And so we were just kind of trying to figure it out. But I knew that those were not the right diagnoses. But, just kept taking him to doctors. And then he started having seizures. The seizures became catastrophic. They could not stop them. No medication would stop the seizures. And he was at age 9, about 4 years later of all of, going to several doctors. 4 years later, he was diagnosed with DRPLA, which is a neurodegenerative condition that begins causing atrophy in the brain. And it's genetic. We know that one of us, my husband or myself, had to have had it. So they tested my husband and I and my other biological daughter, and she was healthy. So I thought, let me just get her tested now so I have that reassurance that she is healthy. And my husband came up positive, and my daughter also has DRPLA. So in the midst of this, I'm trying to raise 6 kids at this time, 2 with special needs from a physical perspective, and then 2 with special needs from a mental health perspective. And so my experience in raising mentally strong kids is literally all of the things that I did wrong, taking into account the things that I tried to do right, and how do we actually, move forward in those mistakes and in those difficulties. Unfortunately, my son passed away in 2016, and my daughter actually just passed away last year in December of 2021. And so a lot of what mentally strong is about teaching mental strength. If I'm standing here and still can teach and encourage people and help people, regardless of what you're going through, you can find your mental strength. And so that's what mentally strong is as a whole. We have lots of different courses. We're just launching the Raising Mentally Strong Kids curriculum. We have a Healing Through the Mentally Strong method, which is my method of how I took care of myself over the course of 15 years, and how I continue to take care of myself. And we teach that. We use that in the clinic. We have a clinic here with about 4,000 patients, and then we teach this course around the Mentally Strong method. So this webinar was, just to kind of give a glimpse into the Raising Mentally Strong Kids curriculum. And it starts with the RESPECT acronym. And, I came up with this as, I'm going through of like, how do we have a mutual respect of this individual who has been granted to your care? And how do we raise them up to be the best version of themselves? I know when I was active in parenting, when my kids were young, I was reading parenting books like a how-to, like it was a science. And, if you just do this, this, and this, they will do this. A lot of kind of behavioral models where, if you just have the right amount of punishment and reward, you can get your kids to be able to be good functioning adults. And I think that is completely oversimplified. And yes, there needs to be, behavioral consequences and rewards, just like real life. But how do we do that in a solid relationship? And so when we go through the RESPECT acronym, am I allowed to switch? You can see I have Jada here making sure. Oh, yeah, next. Okay. So the RESPECT acronym is relationships are a priority, empower versus power, and we're going to go through each of these. Stress is growth. I think we've raised some kids in this idea that we're going to protect them from stress, and we're going to remove them from stress. And what we need to be doing is teaching them how to handle stress, because each time you experience stress and grow from that, you are increasing your ability to cope. Positive, realistic words. We know we need to be speaking positive words to our children. Continuing to educate ourselves. Compassion for ourselves as parents, like forgiving when we make a mistake, giving grace to, like, it's impossible to be 100% consistent 100% of the time. And so really having compassion on ourselves and reminding ourselves that time is a tool. So, and we'll talk about each of these. So when I say relationships are a priority, when we just went through that RESPECT acronym and you think about your relationship with your daughter, what's the first thing that comes to your mind as relationships are a priority?
Just that she knows she feels safe and can trust me,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa, that we can trust each other.
Yeah. You got an example?
Like if something is bothering her at school, I want her to know that she can feel safe to talk to me about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we're in a pretty good spot with our relationship. Yeah. But she's getting to that age,
right,
12 years old, where I feel like she's growing further away instead of closer.
Yeah. And that happens. And one of the reasons that, relationships are a priority are kind of like a core value for me, in the whole business of Mentally Strong. But when I think about it with my children, and my relationship with my mom. So when I was young, I had a really solid, strong relationship with my mom. She was a single mom, and she remarried when I was about that 9 to 12 years old. And so I became kind of second. And then when I was a teenager, I really rebelled. And I compare that to my best friend who had this really solid relationship with her mom. And we were doing the same behaviors that our parents didn't like, right? But my best friend had a really solid relationship with her mom. And so even though there was, conflict and, getting in trouble and consequences and those kinds of things, it didn't impact their relationship. And I think, I had like anger towards my mom. And so it impacted our relationship. And also, I think that many parents think of that behavioral model like, oh my gosh, they're going to ruin their life if they do this. I've got to stop them from doing this. If I'm doing consequences and it's not working, then I need to do more consequences. And it's based on fear rather than relationship. I see it all the time here in the office. Like, parents are so afraid of losing this battle that they are putting the relationship piece on the back burner. Like, almost like, well, it's, I'm too afraid if I am nice and focus on the relationship, then they're going to continue making these choices that are going to ruin their life. Right. And so there's this kind of fear, I think, to really talk about how do we make relationships a priority. And so some of the things that we can do is we can really have those conversations of separating conflict. So let's say there is a conflict that you disagree with something, or that there's a tender spot that is not being dealt with, or that she's pulling away from your influence for that, then say, okay, I want you to have that space. I'm here. What can we do to make you feel closer, or have time in a relationship that doesn't include that? And then you can have a discussion around it. It might be, doing an activity together, or it might be doing nothing. Just, Mom, could you just watch a movie with me? Like, I don't really want to talk. I think a lot of times, we're focused on, getting that true connection. And so just always going back to, and when we go through this respect acronym, is always going back to this number one thing, that relationships are priority. And how do I make sure that I keep doing that? But that doesn't mean just letting them do whatever they want. That's what they want to believe, right? But there is this responsibility that we have as parents to, yes, we're supposed to be teaching them and empowering them and having positive influence in their life, but they are also our responsibility, right? And it is our responsibility to keep them safe. It is our responsibility to teach them what we believe is right and wrong, and kind and not kind. And so I envision this, because this is how I experienced it, was this power versus empower. It's like having a tug of war with your child. And you want to give them the freedom to make a good decision, but they don't make a good decision. So you kind of pull that back and have some consequences there. And so, that for me, it felt like a tug of war when I was actively experiencing it. I have had people say, well, couldn't it be like a beautiful dance where you are leading and they are following? That's not how I experienced, especially adolescence. There was a lot of resistance to follow from my children. And I did the same thing to my mother, right? So, but either way, it's, that relationship still has a responsibility to lead, to empower them, to make good choices, but also taking back that power when they're not making good choices. Do you have some examples of, maybe some struggles that you have with your daughter?
So we've been working a lot on organization lately, and where I've always kind of been there to help make sure she has everything she needs in order. Well, now she's at the age where she needs to start being accountable to be organized herself. And so I'll give her some tools, like a planner, and just, nice little reminders. Did you put your assignments in your planner? And, she doesn't like those reminders. She doesn't like being told that I need to do this, or even cleaning her room, for instance. It's I try not to be the mom saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, but the gentle reminders and even the reminders are sometimes just not very well received. So
yeah. And I like to think about when we're trying to come up with consequences and rewards that actually work, because this is the other thing. People will tell you what's working for them. There's lots of people out there, oh, if you just do this, it'll work. Well, it sounds like it worked for your children. I tried it. It's not working for mine. Or maybe the technique doesn't work for you and your, the way you run your household. We talk a lot about, ABA when it comes to people on the autism spectrum, and you can't do that 100% of the time. Like, it's just not feasible. But what I'd like to do is get parents to think about like real world consequences. What would happen, at work if you couldn't organize yourself? And really, she's at that age where you can start communicating that with her. Like, one day you're going to want a job, what do you think would happen if you didn't get your tasks complete? But also giving that time, just like us as adults, we have to be on our best functioning when we're at the workplace and socially, outside the home. But we also have time at home where we can just not be productive and not be organized. And so really kind of having some conversations around, do you need a space where, you're not organized, or what kind of things do you need to have that space where you don't have to perform? So just thinking about those things as you're kind of going through, because it is a trial and error. What will work for my child and that I can be consistent with, right?
So another thing that we've been struggling with lately is just getting ready in the mornings, getting out of the house on time. And I've even thought about, okay, so do I just let her be late for school to show her the consequence of not leaving on time, instead of me being there like, hurry, 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 and getting yelled at? But I haven't done that yet.
No, and that's a tricky one too, because the consequences that the school's going to give is going to be a consequence for you as well. Right. So, but you could think about that. It's worth a try. And it really depends on the child, right? If that child really does not like to get in trouble outside of the home, like in front of other people, it might actually work. If they don't care about getting in trouble at school, it's probably just going to backfire and be a headache for you, right? So, maybe thinking that through, and, it sounds like you might even be able to have that kind of discussion. Should I just let you be late to school? What is going to happen if you're late to school? Are you going to be okay with that? Mommy's not okay with that, but, and again, that relationship and talking through things, I think as a parent, oftentimes we feel like we need to make the decision that helps them. And because every child is different, it doesn't always work that well. And I know you said kind of on that autism spectrum with some inattention and anxiety, but it sounds like she's pretty high functioning.
Yeah. Yes. High functioning.
Okay. Yeah. And any medications to help with kind of organization and impulse control and those kinds of things?
No. So she has had medication for anxiety, but not for the ADHD. Okay. And so that's kind of untreated. We've, medicine wise, we've been the other part is that she had a one-on-one associate in school until fourth grade. And then she no longer has that. So I feel like maybe we let her slip through the cracks by not teaching her the tools she needed when she had someone there doing a lot of things for her. And now that she doesn't have that extra support, we're kind of like starting at square one at teaching her all these things that she needs to be accountable.
Right. Well, but it's also shown that she's grown to not needing that necessarily one-on-one support. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how you feel about medication, but, a lot of the research shows that it can decrease functional IQ by 20 points if you're not treating that inability, if it's a true inability. So, just kind of thinking about those things. I have ADD myself, and I got all the way through elementary, middle school, never treated. And I do believe that it contributed to my thoughts of I'm not smart. And, some of those negative thoughts that came up, in my adolescence. And so, just kind of, making sure we're having those conversations as well, that, that she knows she's smart, that, sometimes smart is in different ways. And how do you find your smart, and those kinds of things. So, obviously not knowing her personally, but sometimes if we really feel that power versus empower is an actual limitation, is there something we can do about the limitation?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked about some people can have a beautiful dance with their children. That's not what I experienced, but I do believe it's possible, and especially when we can really start young and have that solid relationship. Stress is growth. I think we often, going back to your morning routine of, you are taking on all the stress of being late to school, right? And so your anxiety is increasing, you're anxious, you might be raising your voice, all of the stress of getting there on time is on you, when it really needs to be shifted to her. And now, as we're talking this through, maybe increasing or making the wake up time earlier. So if you can't get up and get ready to school, and I don't have to be involved, then tomorrow I'm going to wake you up at, an hour earlier, until we get to a point where you are doing it on your own. Maybe that way we don't have to involve, actually being late to school. So again, there's no right way to do any of these things, right? It's like you take a problem that you are experiencing, and you work with your child. Like, how can we solve this problem? Because right now it's all on you. You're trying to solve the problem. And then, kind of bringing her into that. How do we solve this problem? Because it's going to cause you stress, hopefully, if you're late for school. And, how is that stress growth? We also talk about, things that happen at school. I hear stories from teachers that, moms are coming in and yelling and screaming at me because I'm doing this wrong, and I hurt their child's feelings, or I did this. And again, are we allowing our children to actually experience the stress of life, right? So the teacher hurt your feelings. What did the teacher say that hurt your feelings? Let's talk that through. What should you do about that? Rather than us going to defend the child at school, can you, approach the teacher? If you don't feel verbally like you can approach the teacher, why don't you write the teacher a letter? And in teaching them, if you are an adult and somebody hurt your feelings, you can't, call your mom to fix it for you, right? You have to, advocate for yourself, learn to do those things. And so really taking the opportunity when when a child is experiencing stress, and it sounds like she's experiencing some anxiety. And so, kind of talking through those things, like how can you, grow from this experience? I always teach people, and there's a big resistance to this, that you can control your anxiety. You are in control of that. But oftentimes we learn to own it, like, oh, this is kind of who I am. I'm an anxious person. And you may be more prone to anxiety than other people, and that's absolutely true. And, encourage treatment from that perspective as well. But the long-term goal should be that you have control of your anxiety. And how do we teach that to our children in this stress is growth? Do you have an example?
So first day of school, unprepared, didn't have her schedule, didn't have her locker combo, and that went into full-blown anxiety attack.
Yeah.
We have done some mindfulness techniques, and I think one of the things I remember is just kind of like recognizing, like, okay, I'm feeling this way, like not letting it take over you, but just recognizing that you're having that feeling.
Yes. Yes. Right. And, let's say they have a full-blown panic attack and maybe you have to pick them up from school, and then it feeds into the anxiety. And then, it's like, well, the next time it escalates, start that conversation with her right now. Okay, what are we going to do next time this happens? Because it will happen again. You will get into a situation that is unorganized. That is a part of life. So what can we do different next time? And kind of write out a plan of, okay, if I didn't, get picked up and go home, what could I have done to be able to bring my anxiety down and stay at school? The other thing about anxiety is I think we're teaching it wrong, that it's on or off. And what it really is a continuum. Okay. So if you're in a full-blown panic, you might be at a 10 if it's on a 0 to 10 scale, right? You're not going to go from a 10 to a 0. It's just not going to happen unless you take medicine or something. But like, in an actual anxious situation. But can you take that 10 to an 8 and stay at school? Or could you take it, even down to a 6 with lots of practice, right? So it's more of teaching it as a continuum rather than as a, well, I'm anxious, so that I'm done. Like, I'll try again next time. But can we just bring it down enough to maybe just skate by the day, or, those kinds of things, and, really adjusting it to their maturity level, the intensity of the anxiety. I mean, anxiety of a 10 is very debilitating, right? And really, but always be working towards that continuum of, can you bring that anxiety down? Not can you get rid of it completely, because that's unrealistic in the midst of a stressful situation.
I like that.
Yeah. So stress is growth. Let's take opportunities as our kids are going through stressful situations. How do we teach them that this is a part of life? We can't avoid it. And the more we experience it, the actual stronger we are. Positive, realistic words. I think this is super important. And when I say realistic words, I think sometimes we tell children things, but then the world is telling them something completely different. And so they don't believe what you're telling them, right? If my mom always tried to tell me that I was smart, but school was really difficult. My teachers, my peers, I felt like I wasn't able to keep up. And so my experiences were telling me that I was not smart, right? And so when we're having these conversations with our children and trying to combat those negative thoughts that they might be having, is we need to make sure that they are realistic and encouraging, and that eventually we're turning it around to them. So, for example, I have a grandson who really struggles with negative thoughts, and he's always saying things about himself. And I'll give him a hug and I'll be like, "You're so handsome." And I give him a hug, and then I'm like, now you say it." And he's like, "No, I'm not gonna say it." "Nope, you say it." "Okay, well, tell me something. What is the thing that you like the most about your looks?" Right. And so getting them to begin that positive self-talk, because unfortunately they don't believe their mom. They believe mom loves me so much that she'll lie to me to make me feel good, right? They don't actually believe necessarily the words that are coming. So making sure that when we're having these conversations, we're having them in a realistic fashion, and especially if the world or their environment is telling them or insinuating negative. Because a lot of times their teacher's not telling them that they're not smart, right? But they're just not getting the grades, or they're not performing like their peers. And so their environment is, kind of contributing to that negative thought. And so remember that we can't replace the negative thoughts in our children's heads. We can only be another influence in that. And so really having those conversations around, well, where are you smart? How could we help you if this is, the environment that's telling you differently? And so really thinking about it as like this whole contributing factor. It's not just those one words that they're saying to themselves. You had something, Dina?
Nope. Just
Oh,
I agree with what you're saying. Really
yeah.
good stuff.
Cool. You have some examples of, has your daughter shared like negative thoughts that she's?
Yeah, she used to deal with more negative thoughts about herself than she does now. But very worried and concerned about what other people think of her.
Yeah. Well, I'm 50 and I still worry about what people think
Yeah.
about me. Um, and so, that might just be your personality, and, and so, working with that as we're kind of talking through those things.
I think right now it's, she's embarrassed by her parents and her grandparents. Don't embarrass me in front of people. So,
Mhm.
yeah, the negative thoughts, I think we've been working on that a little bit, just doing more positive self-talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting her to say those words for sure.
Mhm.
And
And
then
even
you're,
at work, our boss has had us, take a index card and just put one word about, I am whatever.
yeah,
Just a reminder to yourself and put it somewhere where you can see every day.
right. Right. And starting that with your daughter, because, going into those young girl, teenage years, we all remember is difficult, and
Tough time.
people are not nice. And so we have to be nice to ourselves first, for sure. And then you're doing that continuous educating yourself. I think when I was raising my kids, I was in a conservative church that had one way of teaching parenting, and it wasn't working for me. And so then it was all blamed on their previous trauma, or, and so there wasn't this encouraging place to, oh, well, let's keep learning. And so I just kept learning, just, what else can I learn? I thought being a professional that I knew about PTSD, right? I thought I knew about reactive attachment, but actually what to do about it in a day to day, I had to continue to educate myself. And so, remembering that even though we are the adult, um, continuing to educate ourselves on what our child might be experiencing, because it might be very different than us. And this often happens because we often take how we were parented and, take the, whatever our parent didn't provide for us, we want to make sure we, provide that. And so our child often has a very different experience than we had. And so, and then they're their own person, they're their own personality. And so just continuing to educate ourselves in that respect acronym, right? Because it's about, that first thing, relationships are a priority, but it's about a mutual respect. We talk a lot about, kids need to respect adults and respect their parents. And I do believe that. But true respect, not authority, submitting to authority, but true respect is mutual, right? It's not just submitting to authority. And so continuing to educate ourselves on how we can connect with our child, how we can have that solid relationship and solve problems, because there will be problems, right? And then compassion for yourself. And we can't adequately take care of someone else if we're not taking care of ourselves. We can't teach someone mental strength that we're not practicing. We can't teach our children to love themselves if we're not loving ourselves. And I think this is where, I saw it in my mom. I definitely saw it in myself. I didn't start learning how to love myself until I had the time to do it after I had raised my kids, right? And so when I talk about this respect acronym, we've got to take the time to be taking care of ourselves, because our children are watching and we want them to know how to take care of themselves. And self-love is, kind of a buzzword, but what does it really mean? And what does it mean to you? I've heard people say, oh, take a spa day, do this, do that. Those things don't actually work for me. Taking a spa day, like having to do my nails, is like another responsibility, I don't feel relaxed and cared for. And so how to love ourselves is also a very personal journey. You were going to say something?
Oh, I was just, going for walks and listening to music, just anything that helps me calm down, forget about all the responsibilities that I have, leaving work at work.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes. I mean, because there's a lot of responsibilities and there's a lot of stress.
And a lot of expectations. And, the expectations for mothers has just increased. We're supposed to be, just as good as a stay-at-home mom, that is their only responsibility, and still be productive at work. And yeah, the expectations are definitely increasing in our culture. But just like they say on the airplane, like you have to stop and put on your oxygen mask first, because if you're fumbling to put on your child's oxygen mask and you run out of air, then you both don't have oxygen, right? And so the same thing, often happens as we are trying to raise our children. It's like, I truly believe I was in fight or flight mode for 15 years as I was, raising my children. And I didn't know how to take the time to take care of myself. And, really forgiving when we make the wrong decisions. I'm my worst critic. I beat myself up. Oh, I shouldn't have done this with this daughter. It actually made it worse, and it's, impacted our relationship. And I would beat myself up. And so making sure that we have compassion for ourselves and acknowledging where we are in our journey, so that we can be, the best that we can be at the time. We had a new mother here at work, and she's like, I just want to be the perfect mom. And I'm like, let that go. Because there's no such thing like, that perfect mom. But if you go back to the very first thing, if you maintain a relationship, if you make the relationship with your child a priority, all of the mistakes that you make and they make will be forgiven, and you will get through. So, really making that first thing, relationships a priority, the number one thing, whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, like go back to, okay, relationships are a priority, and then go through the respect acronym of, and then getting to this piece. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking that time for yourself? And which goes into the last thing, as time is a tool. And when I say I was going through this fight or flight, the whole time I was raising my kids, I didn't think about this at all. Like some things, the things that I was, so stressed about that I needed to fix right now, fix themselves over time, right? So going back to that first thing, if we make relationships a priority and you maintain that relationship, and there's this problem that's going on right now, is it, that important? Can it wait? Because time often will fix things on their own. And really using time as a tool. I think we're fixers. We want to fix things. But it's their maturity level and their growth. And so having patience and using time as a tool. I wish someone told me that, because I literally had so many stressful crying nights over some of the things that my daughters were doing to me. I felt like they were personal attacks to me, the choices that they were making. And they fixed themselves, like they matured out of that. Yes, there's some consequences to the choices that they made, but they are who they are because of it. And I remember a patient that I had she was adopted, and she was going through her teen years, and she was absolutely rebelling, and mom was doing everything she could to, kind of control that and not allow her to make decisions that would have, these negative impacts on her life. And stress is growth. Sometimes we can't stop them from making these decisions. And I'm not saying you don't try, you definitely try. But realizing that time is a tool, and that whatever stressful thing their choices put them in, if we have a relationship with them, we can help them get out of it, right? And so, bringing all of these things together as, we go through our life of raising our children, right? It's not done at 18, I'm still having conversations with my kids about things that, were a problem back then, when they were teenagers and they were growing up. And one of my daughters, I'm like, that's the same behavior that you did as a teenager. It's kind of dumbed down a little bit, and you're an adult, you're covering it up a little better, but let's get to the root of that. Like, those are some of the same kind of patterns. And so relationships and time, and bringing that whole respect acronym together as we're raising our kids. And so I hope that was helpful. That is just one little part of our Raising Mentally Strong Kids curriculum that just came out on Amazon. The book is on Amazon. But, we really talk about, this whole process. And there's no way to teach one course that teaches you how to raise your kids, right? It's, a lifetime process and trial and error. What works, what's working, what's not working, and really making that relationships are a priority.
Wonderful. No, I really love this acronym, and it's, some things that I took away was really just communicating and having the conversations, talking things through, and having that mutual respect, not just telling them what to do, but let's talk about this. Let's, what can we do? So yeah, this is all very helpful. And I look forward to, learning more and reading more about the Raising Mentally Strong Kids.
Great.
So I appreciate your time
today. And we have lots of free content on YouTube, is where most of the free content is. And and then Jada will send a follow-up email and stuff like that. But it was really nice meeting you.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.